Well, good morning and welcome to this next training session of our Planets project. And today we are intending to talk about fair data, to some extent also on fair models, but then also digital product and material passport, and what pros and cons might be there, what concerns could be there, what challenges, what opportunities, what potentials, what limitations all these kind of terms have. We are looking forward to have quite a interactive session we're anticipating. We have here experts from AMAN, Vanessa and Asif, also people from QSA Lab. Anita is going to be giving some insight on what this concerns on QSA models, for example. Then Carla from Ziensko is going to be also talking a little bit about confidentiality. Benjamin Puntz, my coworker here from Plus, and myself, we are being involved in this training today, and also Beatrice was so kind to provide us the Menti questionnaire, so we are going to get this a little bit more interactive, all of that, and Mattis is going to be presenting that. Let's have a look. So the training was planned for something like 3 hours, but we are going to be definitely having a break, maybe right in the middle, and we will see whether we do extend it to the full 3 hours. It also depends a little bit how exhausted we are going to be getting. We try to have this as interactive as possible, to have many different perspectives from different people, as we see here. In the first half, or maybe it's not half, let's see, we are going to be talking about FAIR, and in the second one about the digital materials product passport, which is an intention in this project, and we are going to be elaborating about that. The training is recorded and will be shared with our colleagues inside the project, and also relevant content can be generated for teaching, training materials to be provided with the community. So we actually did look at a couple of topics that might be of interest for us today. And basically talking about fairness is the first big block, and then talking about the digital product passport is the other block. So there were a couple of terms that we thought, let's clarify that. So in the beginning, we are going to be introducing what FAIR means, why it matters, how it differentiates from open data, for example, FAIR data versus open data. Is it the same? Is there a difference? And where is the difference? Then what are typical issues with that? There are, for example, also awareness, self-awareness checking tools around, where you can also check your data set, or you can check your awareness about how fair your data provision basically is. What are the challenges? How other projects are dealing with that, for example? I mean, there is the World Fair project, for example. There is a huge work package also in PARC on fairness. And for example, this fair implementation profiles is something that we are going to be looking at quickly. Then there is fairness in practice. There are a couple of many things. There are these kind of principles. And there are many things that we need to clarify a bit. Metadata standards, persistent identifiers. What is that? What means persistency? How can we decide about that kind of stuff? Yeah. And then we are going to be also talking a little bit about how we are going to be doing in our project. And this is basically then also a harmonization process. Everybody has a little bit of different understanding of fairness and also wishes towards fairness. So we are going to be trying to put this together on one spot, and let's see how to live it basically. Yeah, and for the digital product passports, there are also many things that are relevant. And I guess I leave this then to Asif to overview all that kind of stuff in the second half of the training. In the middle, we are going to be doing a break, so we can spread our legs and also pick up a coffee or something. That it does not get too much of for today. Anyway, the intention is also to have this as a series of events. In my consideration, fairness is a kind of a process. Also, the development towards living a digital product passport is a development which requires also time. So we would like to start off today to somehow set the stage, to get everybody on board, to create a kind of a common sense in that, to also pick up concerns, to discuss things, because we need to develop something within our project, and in our other projects this is probably quite similar, that we start living this kind of terms. So we are going to have a series, and what we do not manage today, we are going to be picking up at another time point. Right, so past week, many of us were at the CTAC conference. And I went to one session where there was a panel discussion, and we see here from a presentation, very short presentation, maybe something like 2-3 minutes, from the EABAC colleague Marisa Kosnik. She was at the DTU formerly. She works with life cycle assessment, and therefore, of course, requires data sets. And it was quite interesting because she was showing here basically, how relevant data basically are for SSbD and for circularity. I mean, circularity is a big issue, big word, of course. And she was with these very nice slides basically trying to say how scattered our data landscape is. There was also another presentation from somebody from ECHA, and he was saying just 10% of the data that are out there in the literature can be definitely used for regulatory purposes. So there are many challenges basically, how we are going to be dealing and what we can use actually for trying to live SSbD within our processes. There's also another very interesting and impactful paper, I would say, published in RSE Sustainability by a number of colleagues from the PARC project. And I'm just kind of picking this out because of a few points are there. There are many points in this paper, but I would like to maybe contribute a little bit to create relevance at this moment. For example, there are so-called FAIR principles. Yeah, this is quite an abstract term. FAIR principle 1, for example, means metadata shall be assigned to a kind of a global, unique and persistent identifier. So what means unique and persistent identifiers? How can we create such a thing? It's pretty clear that SSbD requires it. If we don't have a persistent identifier, we cannot use the same data eventually a couple of years. So we need to decide about it. And this is also the reason where the stakeholders come in. We know about this, that basically the stakeholders, their impact on SSbD is relevant. We are in our scoping phase already watching out to stakeholders for different reasons. So the decision, this agreement on what is a persistent identifiers and how can we make it persistent and what level of persistence actually is required for what data set. This is actually an agreement that we need to do among all the stakeholders that are relevant here. Cannot be just done by industry itself. It cannot just be done by academia or by the regulators. It needs to be kind of a community agreed process. Or another thing is, for example, Principle 2, we are running later through many of these principles. It says data shall be described in rich metadata. Yeah, so what is rich? Yeah, this is also, again, a community-based agreement and decision. So the minimum information requirements, for example, they have to be somehow agreed by stakeholders. And this is actually something that is talked about a lot in this paper and laid out, and there will be more papers and more approaches in that. So I guess with that, we are a little bit knowing where the direction goes. This is again SSbD. We know about our innovation process, the innovation process from the early stages to the late stages, and this kind of eternal data environment, like depicted here with this eternity sign, tries to depict basically how the data refine the design, can refine the design if they are reliable and available, and data can inform redesign. So either at the beginning or in the middle or at the end of the innovative process, basically data are always relevant. So we need to also, and this is the holistic concept of SSbD as well, to be able to take over data from different position stages in the value chain. And this is how basically fair data principles are somehow also linked to SSbD, and also the DPP comes in, this kind of information flow along value chains, making relevant information available to the different stakeholders that are involved in this SSbD process. Right, so as I said already, the roadmap for our trainings is going to be several stages. We would like to start with awareness today, look into fair data principles, then get also into practical application, and this will be done throughout the project. Basically, we are going to be reiterating to different harmonization events, let's say, and hopefully then appreciate development that goes into a quite fair direction within our project. And then I would now like to give over to Vanessa. I guess I will continue sharing the slides because it's probably
yes, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
All
it's fine for now. Okay. So thank you, Martin, and thank you everyone for accepting this invitation. Okay, I will start with an overview of FAIR data. The FAIR guiding principles were published like 9 years ago, and the first published was in the journal Scientific Data, and the aim of these principles were designed to support scientific data management, but what exactly means FAIR data? So FAIR stands for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. These four attributes represent the goals that we want to achieve when we manage in the good way all the data from a project. So I will start with findable, which means that data should be easy to locate. This requires clear metadata and a persistent identifier, for example, a DOI. The second step is make the data accessible. This implies that once you've found the data, you should know how to access it, whether it's open or it requires authorization, but it needs to be accessible. The third key of these principles is the data to be interoperable. It means that the ability of the data to integrate with other datasets and systems. This means that we need to use shared vocabularies, ontologies, and standards. And finally, the reusable means the data should be well documented, and we need to talk about the licensing. And this is a way to support the future use of our data. All these principles we need to apply, and it's just to have an overview of which really means fair data. Next slide, please. Okay, the important thing here is why we need to apply the FAIR principles in our project. Okay, and this is really important, and it's not optional. This is mandatory since it's established in the Horizon Europe program guide. So it has 3 key aspects. The first one is that all the researchers need to manage the research data following the FAIR principles. This is not just about making the data available. It's more like making data useful for other researchers. So this data needs to be structured and need to have valuable for the future researchers. Secondly, as all we know, we have a data management plan, and this needs to be aligned with the FAIR principles. So that means that in the data management plan, we need to establish how our data will be findable, accessible, and interoperable and reusable, even before research starts. So as we know, we have the first version of this DMP, and it's already structured to have FAIR principles during the whole project. And the third important aspect here is to understand that data can be fair without being open. And this is something that it's commonly confused, because if it means that it's fair, it not necessarily needs to be open. So as open as possible and as close as necessary. What is important here, if we have strong reasons to restrict access to the data, it's okay, but this data still need to be well described and structured in a fair way. So I think this is one of the issues that or concerns that we have in the project, but it's important to establish that the data, it needs to be as open as possible and as close as necessary, respecting all the concerns and all the restricted information that we are handling in the project. Next, please. Okay. Now, just like our small summary, how Martin said, this is one of the first training that we have in our plans. So for now, I'm gonna try to make just a summary for this, and maybe in the next trainings we will be more specific in this information. For now, it's important that to accomplish all these keys for the FAIR principles, we're going to start with the if for findable, and it has 4 keys. The first one is that we have that we need to have persistent identifiers. We need to have rich metadata, which describe the data clearly and in a detail. Which means rich metadata, that this metadata really describe the data that we have in the project. The next one, it's about the index data repositories, that it's important in this key of the FAIR principles. And we need the persistent identifiers as well in the metadata. So we need to have a persistent identifier for a data set, but we need to include this PID also in the metadata. So we have the whole loop to make the data findable. The next is the accessible. Here we need to have a standard communication protocols so data can be retrieved consistently. Next, we need to have these communication protocols that are open and free. We cannot use nothing that it's proprietary. We need to establish authentication. We will have information that it's restricted, and we need to identify where is the information, who needs the information, when we can share this information, and where will be this information. So this is important. We need to establish the authentication process for the information. And the metadata, it needs to be always available. Even if if the data set it's not available anymore, the metadata needs to continue be available. The next step, it will be the interoperable. We need to have here vocabularies. These vocabularies need to be fair, and these vocabularies need to have link metadata. And finally, about the reusable. For reusability, we need to have metadata with multiple attributes. We need to talk about license. We need to have what is the provenance of this information, of this data, and we need to follow some community standards that are now working with all these principles. Next slide, please. Okay, so as you know, this is something that all the projects are working, and there are a lot of projects with aims to have some tools or to provide some information that can be useful to other projects to just assess this information. So now we have here a really good tool, which is called FairAware tool. And we would like to share with you now this information, this tool, sorry. So you can take a look. I will put in the chat. I will really appreciate if you can go to the website and take a look at this tool. I don't know, Martin, if we're gonna make the...
Yeah, let's try it out. So I guess we have got it into the chat. Please be so kind, put it into your web browser, go into it. It's an awareness tool. It basically, you can run through this survey, ask yourself, how did you deal with this? It runs basically through these 15 different FAIR principles, gives also some information about it. So there are links also to further information platforms or internet pages and stuff. And you can do it with maybe a data set in your mind. For academics, it could be maybe my most recent paper that I have published, just look at it. And in the end, you question yourself, how fair did you work? By running through this project, you get a little bit more familiar with these 15 different FAIR principles, that some of them were maybe sounding a bit more logical, some were maybe a little bit more far distant. We need to get a little bit a feeling for that. Not every of these FAIR principles will be equally relevant for us in our project. But some of them, maybe they sound a little bit more complicated than they are. So let's try it out. I would say let's invest something like 10 minutes on that.
Okay.
Would you also maybe open the internet page and shall we run
yes.
through it together?
Yes, I think. There are 10 questions. It's just yes and no questions. And you can assess your data set, for example, as Martin said.
So this is actually the landing page. And in the end, you get a kind of awareness score and also your willingness to comply. We will also come back to some other types of tools a little bit later. So in the end, or in the beginning, you start inputting basically more or less just some kind of basic information who you are, but then it comes to these type of questions, yeah. And in these kind of information boxes, you can then get links to further web pages where explanations about what, for example, a global unique and persistent identifier, what are the requirements for that? How likely are you willing to comply with this practice? It depends on also your requirements. Eventually, you can't be open with everything, yeah. But using a persistent and global unique identifier, do you know it basically? So when I was doing it first time, I had no idea what is this persistent and what means persistent. So shall we continue, or would you still like to read a little bit through that or work it through? I mean, I have not ticked things. I guess you can probably come up with a result. This at least works. But the more interesting thing in my view is actually this kind of supplementary information that you encounter while running through it.
Just one remark. So they're basically asking, are you aware of this, right? And then, are you willing to do that? My feeling is I'm quite willing if it is very easy to do somehow, right? I think many people would have probably, if there's an easy way to do these things, then why not, right?
Right, but it also complies to the requirements that you can do. I mean, as academics, we are always it's a little bit easier for us. The tool has been transforming. There was a time when this tool you could really kind of apply your data sets on. So for example, if you have a data set in place and you are not asking yourself, am I willing to do, but did I do in this study, for example? And by that means it helped us, for example, because we were encountering the first version of this tool Something like 3 years ago, when we did conduct the very first Data Fairness Award in Cyprus at the Nano Week. And by running through this tool, you could start optimizing a data set. For example, then on your Zenodo provided raw data sets, for example, include a kind of persistent identifier, or you would then start to use a format that is not Excel, for example. So a CSV file, for example, is a better file format and things like that. And by that means, you could basically optimize the fairness verification value of your data set. So meanwhile, it's more kind of serving the awareness of the researcher and gives you a value of whether you want to do that. But I guess you can easily refer it also to a very concrete data set. Have I done it? You can also use it as a kind of checklist. Have I done it? And what else could I do? That you would just run through these basically 15 principles and check it out.
Yeah. Exactly what you said about. So if we as a team would be able to create some tips and tricks on how to do these things, that would also be very useful, I think.
Exactly.
So how do you do it?
I think it's one of the goals that we have in Work Package 2, maybe task 2.4, to have this kind of tools for our project, for our data sets, for our data. The idea it's exactly this, to make like a test and evaluation, and then how we can start with all this process and all the verification process that it's the goal of this task it's in the project.
Yeah,
I think, for example, this fairness principle 2, the rich metadata set. This is a very relevant thing, because what is a rich metadata set? Data are just useful if the metadata set really comprehensively enough describes the data set. And this we see so often, and this was actually the critical point also of Marissa, I would say, that the metadata set, if you really try to reproduce something or reuse it with any kind of model or tool that you encounter, well, you find a data set and another data set, and they have just different metadata eventually, but totally controversial data. So you cannot really reuse it for any kind of modeling purpose. And that's the problem. And this is actually something that we in our project need to, can actually define. And this needs to be defined maybe then even beyond projects. Another thing what Vanessa mentioned was, for example, the accessibility of the protocol. This does not disclose anything that is relevant for your study eventually. It just discloses the way how you did. So the protocol needs to be somehow accessible. It does not disclose any kind of proprietary information, but the protocol informs a lot about the richness of the metadata that are available. And by accessibility of the metadata, one at least knows that there is some data existing on that and then there can always be some agreements found to eventually then get hold of such type of data for eventually contribute or kind of reusing it in a different context. So this is basically the idea and the advantage or the opportunity in fairness. I guess let's go over to the next slide, maybe. We have seen this.
Yes,
we will clarify how we can optimize and hopefully then run through this kind of protocol and get access to the more information sites. I will point this out to the people that I think that have produced this web page, and go to the next slide to so-called fair enabling resources. And I would like to give the word to Ben that guides us through these kind of slide.
Hello, also from my side. I hope my microphone is working. I will talk you through the fair enabling resources, short FAIR, and their tools, infrastructures, standards, or services that help you to facilitate the implementation of the FAIR principles. By using those tools, you do not necessarily make your data fair, but they help you to get to this point. And just some short examples. We already heard of quite of those already. We, for example, have data repositories. Those are databases where you can upload your data. For example, Zenodo. Some of you might already know this. And you get a DOI out of this. And by uploading it, everybody who has the link or finds it online can download your raw data. Then also persistent identifier systems. For example, here we have the DOI number, or also ORCID, which is a standardized name scheme where, for example, your papers are also have a DOI number, or ORCID is linked to certain researchers. Then you have metadata standards, with some examples like Dublin Core, which breaks down your representation of the metadata to 15 core points and questions that helps you to standardize it. Then also ontologies, like for example with the vocabulary, that you have ontologies, databases where you have biological systems, biotechnology, but also, for example, different species, like with the NCBI taxonomy, or also gene data sets. Then we have data stewardship tools, for example, with fair sharing, the data stewardship wizard, or also the fairware tool, which is what we just looked at, which is more or less a questionnaire that helps you realize what you can do to make your data more fair. And also recently, people developed fair metrics and assessment tools, like for example, the Fair Evaluator or the Fuji tool, where you can upload the data and it helps you to evaluate your data. It doesn't make it more fair, but it just highlights some certain points that you could make to achieve fairer data. Next slide, please. And here is some key consideration for selecting possible fairs. What's important for those? So regarding the relevance, can the tool provide what we need? So what the data needs to more or less make it easier to understand for other researchers who might access them, but also does it support relevant data types? For example, with FAIR, mostly, as you see in the bottom left, with interoperability, you have certain data types, for example, XML data type or JSON, CSV, that most convenient for everybody to be used. There's also user friendliness. So how accessible are the tools? Are they easy to understand, or is there also properly explained, for example, with the information buttons we had on the previous site that unfortunately did not work? Then we also have interoperability, meaning that are they compliant with the FAIR principles and standards? Do they have integrated existing tools? And obviously, do they support our proper file data types? And then going to the scalability and flexibility, are they adaptable to different use cases? So can only biologic researchers use those, but also chemists or maybe even geologists? Are the tools scalable? So can you only add small data sets, but also multiple data sets over many files? If this is possible, it's probably very good for ease of use. And then also, are they customizable for specific workflows, for more complex workflows? And what's also very important is the sustainability. Do the developers still actively work on those projects? Or is it just a one-time publishing it to the community and then not working on it? Because typically, when tools are being used, you get a lot of feedback with requested additional features being added, quality of life features, which unfortunately sometimes don't find their way into the tool if the tool is not longer being worked on. And then to the next slide, please. And then I also briefly talk about FIPS, being the FAIR implementation profiles, and those are structured community-driven descriptions of how FAIR principles are implemented. This is a very critical tool, which we also mentioned previously, and this allows you in your community, when you make a FAIR data set, to also explain yourself, why you made certain decisions, to highlight what tools were used and why you decided to go for that tool. And this you can also publish on Zenodo, for example. So every other possible community that might be interested in your implementation profile and who's interested in your reasoning, why you made certain decisions, can look at this data set and then also maybe even apply it for their own project, get introduced to new FAIR enabling resources. And this is all in all a very essential tool for cross-community talk, and lets every stakeholder in your project, for example, speak up and explain their reasoning. And thank you.
One thing that Ben did not mention.
Sorry, Martin, we are not hearing you.
Okay. So what Ben did not mention yet, FAIR implementation profiles are basically established community-wide and for their domains by using a wizard. This is a development from the World FAIR project, and is also, I guess, driven a lot in Park. How researchers are via using this FAIR implement or FIP wizard, basically communicating it, then at a certain time point come to a conclusion and somehow form this agreement. And I guess maybe we can invest once a training into looking into this this wizard. Next slide. Good. Let's have a look what FAIR is not. Yeah. So we talked a lot now about the principles and enabling tools and wizards and stuff and profiles. But FAIR is, for example, not. I mean, FAIR is not something that is a black and white thing. You cannot be fully fair. You cannot be fully unfair. Yeah. So FAIR is, for example, there is quite a gradient within that. So it's not a standard. This was also said already. Yeah. Basically, it's in the end, if we are living fairness to a quite high extent, then we are establishing a kind of semantic web, and the highest opportunity is probably in the machine readability. So to make data fully machine readable and reusable. So this is basically probably the biggest goal that we can go for here. Again, this was said already before, FAIR does not mean open or free, not open or free, open accessible, for example. Yeah, data can be open and not fair at all, for example. Yeah, so just loading up something onto Zenodo does not mean anything on fairness. Yeah, data can be eventually not open at all, but they can be fair. So this is not the same thing. This is, I guess, really we should be very explicit about that. FAIR is a kind of an idea that has nothing to do with data quality. So the quality of the data, the richness of the metadata set, for example, can be done, but the quality is a different issue. So we, in addition, have to also consider about data quality standards eventually, trustworthiness, responsibility, ethics. So this is actually not an issue of fairness itself. It helps you, but it does not 100% fair does not mean actually that the quality is the same thing. So, and as I was saying originally, there is not being fair or not being fully unfair. There is always a gradient in between it. So, for example, in the commission paper here, they are also laying out this kind of different levels where fairness can be lived within a project, within a kind of community, within a value chain or something, from fair start to be the fairest of them all, right? So where fair sharing is also implemented. And this is again a shot from Marisa's talk, or kind of input for the panel discussion. Fair in itself does also not mean efficiently or effectively used and be available for being reused. Good. Over again to Vanessa. Now running through a couple of slides on this more practical content for the principles.
Okay, now we're gonna start with the fair in practice, just to mention some concepts and some keys for understand how to make a fair in practice. So first, and I think one of the most important things, it's to establish what is metadata. Okay, metadata, it's known like the data that defines and describes other data. But why this is important? So this is important because it's the key to find another data. So we need to establish that this metadata needs to be interoperable, reusable, accessible, and it needs to have a contextualization. For example, metadata allows the data sets to be exchanged and understood across different platforms and systems. So we need to ensure that interoperability it's a part of our metadata. About their usability, it provides the necessary context to understand the data, making it easier for others or even for us in the future to reuse this information. About the access and the discovery, we need to establish well-structured metadata so it will make easier to find and retrieve datasets in catalogs or repositories. About the metadata standards, there are a set of rules, structures, and control vocabularies that will enable the consistent and meaningful description about our data. Next, please. Next slide, please. Okay, another important thing to talk about is PIDs, these persistent identifiers. There are long-lasting, globally unique reference to a digital resource. What means? It can be a dataset, a publication, or even a person or institution. It's not just for datasets, just for files. Even it can be for a person or institution, and we need to have these persistent identifiers in all our ecosystem, because we need to identify who is working with who. So this is really important. Every research needs to have an ORCID ID. And another example of PID, it's DOI, identifies publications, dataset, and software. And as well, it's really important to have this ORCID for all of us. But what this is important? This is important because it improves research visibility and attribution. It's important to citation, to reference other people's work, and it's important to have in the loop all the information that we are using. So, for example, using PIDs, it will improve research visibility, of course. They support interoperability, and they are aligned with FAIR principles. So specifically with the principle of be findable and accessible. Next slide, please. Another important thing here is to mention that all our data need to be licensing and accessible in FAIR data. So we need to choose what is the license that we need to use for our results. It's important because it ensures clear terms of reuse of your data. This I think it's one of the concerns that we have here. It's about the confidentiality and some concerns about the how to be shared. But if we ensure that all the data has a license, it's a really good way to ensure that the information it's going use for the correct people, or the people that really need to have access for this information. So license and access information ensure the data is used ethically and legally, promote data reuse, and help researchers understand how they can work with your data. So it's really important to establish, and we will establish this license and access in the next steps of our project, of course. Next slide, please.
Maybe let's have this question. We have a question in the chat.
Okay, sorry.
Because it refers to the persistent identifiers. So a concrete example. Can we get a persistent identifier for a restricted data set? And what persistent identifier could we use here?
Yeah, we have in the next slides some tools that we can use, for example, for provide a digital object identifier. So there's called DOI system, and it's a tool to provide this kind of identifiers. So maybe we can go next to these examples and to see in more detail. Should we show the tools now or after the slides?
Well, you decide.
Okay, so please, next slide. We have the slide about open source resources. Okay, here. So, for example, to make a DOI identifier, we can go to this link, and it's a tool to provide this kind of identifiers. We need to complete a registration. We need to provide some information about your dataset, and it will have you this kind of identifier. For a dataset, we can do the same thing, and it will be the identifier for your results. It's not for this training example, but we can make in another training just to, for example, to have a data set and make like an example for this, because
Okay.
I think we will take a lot of time to do this, but yeah, we can take in account for the next training if you agree.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
Okay, then I go back
So,
these two slides that
yes,
I have.
Please. Yes, because we have
this one.
Yeah. Vocabularies. Okay. About the vocabularies, they are standards, set of terms to use and describe data elements. It's important because they guarantee semantic clarity and consistent across datasets. Some examples of this, it's KEBI in AnoMapper ontology, and these are like the more related or filed, but there is a lot of vocabularies or a lot of ontologies that we can use in the project, and we can have like a base for our job. The best practices and vocabularies are the use of domain-specific ontologies. We need to have linked data to persistent identifiers. Again, the persistent identifiers are really important here, and ensure that these vocabularies are open, are well documented, and maintained. There are these vocabularies enables to automatic processing and integration the data across the several systems, and they are ensuring that everyone use the same language. This is really important when we are sharing with other people our results. Next, please. And some advices to improve the metadata. It was mentioned a lot about rich metadata. What means rich metadata? It means that the metadata includes detailed descriptions, context, and relation with other projects or with the other elements of the data. It needs to be standardized. Again, about using vocabularies, it needs to be machine readable. So, for example, here for the Planets project, we have defined that we will use JSON LD, This is according with some conversation that we have with TNO. They are using something really similar. For example, the triple store standard and formats. So we will use specifically for planets JSON LD. It needs to be linked to external identifiers and need to be updated, not just to have the information and just leave it there. We need to maintain the information. We need to maintain the data that we provide, and it needs to be versioned alongside the data. So some of the other examples to improve the metadata is using identifiers, persistent identifiers, adopt a metadata standard, apply vocabularies and ontologies, and include provenance of information. We just not leave the information without the say where is this information coming. So it's really important about the provenance information, and it's one of the keys for improving metadata. Next, please. And here it's just a summary of some resources to support FAIR data. We have the really important resource is the FAIR Cookbook. It's an online resource they are providing some like receipts to help you to make the data fair. So there is the Go Fair. It's like one of the most important projects that are dealing with fair data. Fair sharing, that it was already mentioned, and we have, for example, here DOI system, DOI system, and it's a tool to provide digital identifiers. Zenodo, that it was already mentioned, and for example, we have a Figshare, which is a repository where all the users can make all the research outputs available. Some resources that I encourage you to take a look. It will be really interesting that you can take some comments for the next trainings, and we can, of course, review some of these tools as well for the next trainings. Next, please. Okay. So this is for Anita.
Yes, thanks, Vanessa, for running us through this couple of more concrete and specific content slides, which we are overviewing today, and there probably organize other sessions to have a little bit more closer look into. May I give the word now to Anita, because fairness is also quite an important aspect for QSAR, and there are, of course, also limitations by using tools in this area.
Yes, good morning. So, as you know, QSAR models are widely used in computational chemistry to predict activity and properties of chemicals. And while QSAR models offer significant potential to accelerate research, their utility and reliability are highly dependent on how well they are adhere to FAIR data principles. And in case of QSAR perspective to FAIR, so first, findability. So the issue is the QSAR models, data sets, and associated metadata are often poorly documented and published in non-standard formats, making them hard to locate. Many models exist in academic paper or different systems without persistent identifiers like DOIs, which limits their discoverability. And in QSAR perspective, so from the model side, the inability to be found means a loss of visibility, reproducibility, and validation. So lack of standardized metadata and indexing reduces the chance for model to be reused in the future. In case of accessibility, Access to QSAR models is frequently restricted due to paywalls or software or lack of user-friendly repositories or missing licensing terms. And data sets used to train models may be also hidden or scattered. From the QSAR perspective, a model that cannot be accessed is non-existent in scientific discourse, and accessibility barriers limit peer review, updating the models, and also application in regulatory or industrial settings. And even open publications sometimes lack links to the actual model files or code. In case of interoperability, so here QSAR tools and data formats vary widely. Models may use different chemical descriptors, modeling algorithm, different file formats without standardization or proper annotation. And from a model point of view, lack of this interoperability reduces integration into larger workflows, like, for example, in silico screening pipelines. And non-standard formats prevent reusability across platforms and reduce collaborative potential. And in case of reusability, QSAR models often lack sufficient documentation and model parameters, training data sets, validation strategies, and assumptions. So the QMRF format is not present, and also licensing is often missing or unclear. And QSAR models that cannot be reused loses values over time. So without this transparency and clear licensing, it cannot contribute to science and to the research. Also, regulatory agencies like ECHA or FDA require reproducible and well-annotated models, making fair alignment for the regulatory acceptance. Next slide, please. And in case of opportunity for the improvement, so it is needs, for example, to provide different model repositories. So adoption of repositories such QSAR database, biomodels, or fair sharing can promote standardized storage with rich metadata, and also in those repositories special format like QMRF format of QSAR should be implemented there. Also, the other opportunities is the ontology use, so applying different chemical and data ontologies to annotate databases and models. Then the persistent identifiers, so assessing DOAs to models and database, it will help. And open standards, so promoting also open source tools and standard descriptor sets like PADL or RDKit ensures broadly accessibility and interoperability of the models. So from the QSAR models perspective, adhering the FAIR principles is not just an administrative or ethical goal, let's say. It's a functional necessity for scientific impact, for regulatory acceptance, and for community collaboration. So improving those fairness in QSAR modeling will strengthen the field credibility and utility across chemicals, pharmaceuticals, and other environmental dimensions also. Yeah, so these are perspectives from QSAR and from my
Thanks,
side.
Anita. Yeah, very, very useful. I don't know, ad hoc, Eugene, Neeraj, would you like to add something? I mean, Anita was already talking about using data for QSAR models. Would you like to add something on this topic, usefulness at this stage?
Well, I also have a question, if you don't mind. Rather than because interesting for QSARs, of course, you have the connection between the model, the QSAR, and the dataset that has been used. So it's interesting to think about together also on a metadata description of the data set and metadata description of the model that refers then to the metadata of the data that was used to learn that QSAR model, I think.
Yeah, any other questions at this stage? We have been elaborating already quite a while on fairness and now also on the QSARs.
Just one question out of curiosity, Anita, if you could enlighten me about you mentioned about the regulatory acceptance. So according to you, how the FAIR principle helps you towards the regulatory acceptance of the tools in general, not only limited to the QSAR, of course, you can focus on QSAR, but perhaps in general.
So in case of regulatory acceptance, when you would like to apply available QSAR, then you have to produce a special report of the predictions. So the one report is QMRF, so it described all OECD principles and model itself. But then if you would like to, for example, if you would like to perform the predictions and then those predictions give as a report for example to ECHA, you need to prepare a QPRF, so this is QSAR prediction report for the compound of interest, and then within this report there are also all details in terms of the if the from what repositories the models are, what are the rules, what is the license, what is the predictions, of course, everything connected with the predictions, applicability domain, and so. But also all information about model itself and accessibility should be there also included. So it means that you need to apply models that are accessible for maybe not for everyone, because sometimes you can use those from different tools where there are licenses, but everything should be stated in such a report in case of regulatory agencies.
So there is a minimum threshold then to be covered by the QSAR models.
Once again, please.
So there are some minimum thresholds defined by ECHA that need to be covered by a certain QSAR model.
Well, you mean thresholds to?
So the QSPR thing that you mentioned. So this is like a threshold limit, right? So it provides certain requirements that need to be fulfilled, right?
Well, maybe not. There are not so. No, you mean the thresholds for the model itself and for the predictions, or the thresholds? No. So in that case, no. The most important part is the let's say expert assessment of the predictions. So there are not limits. The QSAR as one tool, it is not possible, to register only on compound only on QSAR. this could be the broader approach, like weight of evidence, when QSAR is a part of gathering everything together, and then the QSAR can be used itself for helping to strengthen the decision, let's say. But not you may not only rely, let's say, on QSAR in such a case.
Of course, of course. So that's something within the model fair point also. It can be some a critical parameter, not only for QSAR but all other models that are considered. So just for your information, not only pertaining to QSAR but also in the past we have been working on the TRAC framework. So that's something which we can take on board. So TRAC is also something that somehow not defined, but somehow gives you an indication towards how ready a certain tool is towards regulatory acceptance on a general basis. There are certain aspects on which it is defined. So that's something, however, how it stands vis-a-vis the FAIR principles, so the findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability, that something needs to be checked because there are many aspects that are shared between TRAC and FAIR principles, but in what concrete terms, that something needs to be worked upon, and something we can think of taking on board within the model fair point part, because that will give you directly an idea about the regulatory acceptance, if that is something of interest.
Okay. Thanks a lot for these inputs. And
thank you, Anita. If you have one or two of the example reports, it would be interesting to study for us to see, because it already describes most of the metadata, perhaps. So interesting if you have some kind of example to share with us.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. On the transition to create a DPP, the term or the kind of concern of confidentiality has also been raised. And Carla, would you like to give a few of your thoughts on this issue?
Yeah, sure. So when we were discussing a bit this challenge for industry, right, that there is the need to keep intellectual property, it was interesting that we came across with this paper that was the results of the collaboration of 10 pharmaceutical companies. So they shared data. There was a sharing of a lot of data to train some QSAR models, and they use this using this federated learning approach. So it's a machine learning approach that multiple entities can collaborate to train a model and still keeping the data decentralized and private. So this is a technique that is used also in defense. So it was interesting to come across with this point, of course, that then for industry, for the DPP, there will be the need of having tailored approach for data storage, and also to critical point will be encryptation, because that's the only way that the data will be able to be passed along. And there are also several techniques for encryptation, and there is this zero knowledge proofs, which is a method that allow to the data to be transferred to provide a proof of compliance with a specific aspect, in this case for the DPP, right, without revealing any sensitive product data. So this was what I found a bit on the industry side, that there are things that are possible to implement. But of course, this is something that needs to be systemic. No, I don't think it's the in our power of action in the planets to develop such kind of thing, because it needs to be integrated with other systems. And if you go to the next slide, that is again these nice pictures of this session that was at CTAC. We still have an issue of data management, because as is shown here, there is the scientist. In this case was more for the scientists so you produce database. You can either put your data in different databases, and depending on the area that you are researching, researching in genetics, environmental science, you will create your data according to the what is used in your field, no? So that will generate a huge amount of data. Then there's also the data that is published via in the scientific publications, or that you can put it in Zenodo, or you can even create your own database. So exactly this is very challenging, because data indeed is already there, but there is a big challenge on who is gonna in the end manage all this. So the Commission has a data strategy also, and it's supposed to deal with these issues of particular interest for industries on the intellectual property, but it's quite a gigantic task, I would say, that to achieve such a system. But in any case, I wanted to share just these points from the industry perspective, from the
Yeah, thanks a lot, Carla, for this. I guess very relevant, the connection between all these different dots that we are accumulating at the moment. And there are initiatives going on, as we have tried to depict today, like World Fair, Go Fair, Figshare, FileShare. There are tools around, there are wizards, there are kind of initiatives where you can contribute to from these different perspectives. So I guess quite relevant to push this further. And there is an advantage in that. I hope you see that.